Are we about to witness a seismic shift in the Toronto Maple Leafs roster? With the futures of key stars hanging in the balance, the team could be eyeing a three-time Stanley Cup champion to step in if things go south. This summer, decisions will be made that could change the landscape of our beloved Leafs, and one name is generating a lot of buzz among insiders. Could our dreams of a championship hinge on the fate of one player? Stick around as we dive into the potential shakeup that could bring a legendary forward to Toronto. As we dive into the latest buzz surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs, there's a real sense of urgency in the air. Mitch Marner and John Tavares are both entering a critical phase of their careers as they approach free agency. With July 1st looming, the question on every fan's mind is, will they stay or will they go? The stakes couldn't be higher for our beloved Leafs, and the potential ramifications of their decisions could redefine the team for years to come. Recent reports from James Myrtle and Jonas Siegel over at The Athletic highlight a fascinating scenario that could unfold if either Marner or Tavares decides to test the waters of free agency. They suggest that the Leafs might look to bring in a familiar face, three-time Stanley Cup champion Patrick Kane. Can you imagine that? The thought of Kane, a childhood hero of Austin Matthews, donning the blue and white is enough to get any Leafs fan excited. Now, let's break this down a bit. If Marner opts to leave, it could open the door for William Nylander to step into a top-line role. That's a big opportunity for Nylander, but it also raises questions about the team's overall depth. If they lose Marner, they'll need to replace that offensive firepower, and Kane could be a potential answer. However, there's always that lingering concern about Kane's age and injury history. At 36, he's not the same player he once was, and we all know how the NHL can be unforgiving to veterans. Still, if he can stay healthy, he could provide the kind of scoring punch that the Leafs desperately need. Marner is reportedly looking for a contract in the ballpark of $13 to $14 million annually. That's a significant investment for the Leafs, especially when you consider Tavares is also in the final year of his contract and has been producing at a high level. With 69 points in 67 games this season, Tavares is still a crucial part of this team. But as Nick Caprios pointed out, the Leafs seem to be prioritizing Marner in their discussions. It's a tough spot for the organization, and I can't help but wonder, are they making the right choice? If they do decide to let Marner walk, the pressure will be on to find a suitable replacement. Patrick Kane could fit the bill, but is he the best option? The thought of bringing in a player with Kane's pedigree is enticing, but it also comes with risks. Should the Leafs gamble on Kane, or should they focus on securing the core they already have? Honestly, I'm torn. On one hand, you want to maintain a competitive edge, but on the other, you don't want to lose what makes this team special. It's not just about the contracts. It's about the culture and the identity of the Leafs. We've seen how crucial chemistry is on the ice, and bringing in a player like Kane could disrupt that. Or perhaps it could elevate it to new heights. The dynamics are complex, and as fans we feel every emotional twist and turn. We invest so much into this team, and every decision made at the management level has the potential to impact our dreams of a championship. As we await more developments, I want to hear from you, the passionate Leafs fans. What do you think? If it comes down to choosing between Marner and Tavares, who would you prioritize? And if Marner does leave, would you welcome Patrick Kane with open arms, or do you think the Leafs should look elsewhere? Your opinions matter, and I want to hear them down below in the comments. Mitch Marner is just 3 months away from becoming an unrestricted free agent, and every passing day seems to increase the odds that he might test the market. But will he really leave the only NHL team he's ever known? Only Marner knows for sure. But there are many factors at play in this complicated situation. Many people will point to the potential for a bigger payday as the main reason Marner could explore free agency. But there are personal and professional reasons that might lead him to feel it's time to look elsewhere. We've seen Marner and his agent be patient in negotiations before, like back in 2019 when they took things all the way until September, before he signed that 6-year, $65, $358 million extension. Interestingly, he received several offer sheets from other teams back then, but he prioritized staying in Toronto. This time, If he waits until July 1st, he could entertain offers from any NHL team, potentially leading to greater demands for both salary and contract length. It's worth noting that his agent, Darren Ferris, has a history of negotiating contracts right up to the deadline, which could make things even more dramatic. Currently, Marner has an average annual value of just under $11 million, which represented 13.37% of the NHL salary cap at the time of his last contract. With the cap expected to rise, it's not unreasonable for him to seek a similar figure as a UFA. If he does, we could be looking at a contract with a cap impact of around $12.77 million, which is a bit below Auston Matthews' $13.25 million impact. For context, Matthews' deal represented 15.07% of the cap when he signed. Marner would be asking for a smaller slice of the pie, but it still raises questions about how the Maple Leafs can balance their roster moving forward. Matthews and William Nylander have both signed lucrative extensions, and while Marner is undoubtedly a game-changer, committing to all three again is tricky, especially since they haven't advanced past the second round of the playoffs. This complicates salary cap flexibility. There's a valid argument that you pay your stars and then figure out depth later, but as Toronto has learned, those depth pieces need to be compensated too. The Maple Leafs ranked 28th in the NHL for prospect depth recently, which means they'll need to make trades or sign free agents to fill gaps. If they tie up 40% of their cap space in 3 players, adding free agents or taking risks on underperformers becomes an increasingly difficult task, especially with restricted free agent Matthew Knies and former captain John Tavares waiting in the wings. Marner is well aware of the pressure that comes with playing in the Toronto market. When the team wins, players are celebrated as heroes, but the opposite is true when they lose. This is particularly relevant in the playoffs, where the Maple Leafs have faced years of disappointment. If Toronto suffers another early playoff exit, who could blame Marner for wanting to explore options elsewhere? He's faced heavy criticism from fans and the media in Toronto, which might drive him to seek a less intense market where he could enjoy some anonymity away from the rink. It's no secret that playing in a Canadian market can create fatigue, especially for someone who has spent their entire career in that environment. The dynamics have shifted with the departure of former general manager Kyle Dubas, who was close to Marner during his time in Toronto. Now, with Brad Treliving at the helm and Dubas in Pittsburgh, it's hard to say if Marner will feel the same loyalty during negotiations. Some speculate that Dubas and the Penguins might make a play for Marner this summer, but given Pittsburgh's current rebuilding phase, it seems unlikely they could offer a competitive environment for him to win anytime soon. That said, Marner has spent his entire professional career with the Leafs, and he's always been a Toronto kid. He played junior hockey just a stone's throw away in London, and he hasn't lived more than a couple of hours from the Greater Toronto area. While athletes do relocate, they typically don't do so as they approach their 30s. That's not to say it can't happen, but it's uncommon. With a rising salary cap, many teams could afford Marner, but how many can offer a better situation than what he has in Toronto? Teams like Buffalo and Pittsburgh could theoretically pay him. But the Sabres haven't been to the playoffs in nearly 15 years, and Pittsburgh is still retooling. San Jose might present a compelling case, especially with young talents like Macklin, Celebrini and Will Smith, but Marner already has top-tier players to work with in Toronto and the added comfort of familiarity. Carolina could also be in the mix, but it's unlikely since he reportedly turned down a trade to the Hurricanes just weeks ago. The Maple Leafs remain well within their competitive window, with a core that still includes Matthews, Nylander, Morgan Rielly, and others. While they've struggled in the playoffs, only winning one series in recent years, they've been a fantastic regular season team for nearly a decade. Great teams often face heartbreak before learning how to win when it matters, and Toronto could be that team if Marner sticks around for the journey. It's clear that Toronto has paid heavily for its stars over the past decade, struggling to get players to accept discounts to stay. To be fair, if the Maple Leafs didn't pay their stars, someone else would. The same principle applies to Marner. If he hits the market, another team will meet his asking price. It's the nature of unrestricted free agency, and the Maple Leafs will need to come close to Marner's desired figure if they want to keep him in the fold. Many NHL players have learned the hard way that the grass isn't always greener with a new team, and that free agent money can sometimes become a burden. The familiarity of playing in his hometown for tens of millions of dollars without having to start over in a new city might just be enough to keep Marner in Toronto. On a personal level, players tend to prefer staying close to home as they age and start families. Still, with each day that passes, the possibility of his return seems to tighten a bit more. However, the Maple Leafs remain the favourites to retain Marner long-term, as the allure of chasing a Stanley Cup with his hometown team could be too strong to resist. So, what do you think? Will Marner stay a Leaf, or is he destined for another team? Honestly, I'm torn. I want to hear your opinions down below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to stay updated on all things Toronto Maple Leafs, and activate the notification bell to get all the latest updates.